I had a very strong sense when I was in the Antarctic that nobody owns it. Scientists don't own it. The men who pull their frozen sledges across it and publish books with frozen beards on the front, they don't own it. Nobody owns it. I had as much right to be there as anybody else.
That is Sara Wheeler. Now, she didn't grow up in a household where travelling overseas was some sort of entitlement, perhaps like some of those frozen beards she just referred to. In fact, in her working class family, the concept of abroad was like going to another planet. Until something happened which opened up her eyes to literally a whole new world. This is Travel That Made Me, with the acclaimed travel writer, biographer, and global explorer, Sara Wheeler. Sara Wheeler, welcome to Travel That Made Me.
Thanks for having me, Raja. Great to be here.
Let's jump straight in with the question that I think really gets to the heart of everything, really, which is, tell me the one travel experience that made you who you are today, shaped your outlook on life, if you like.
You know, Rajan, it wasn't at all hard for me to answer that question. I knew straight away I had to talk about the Antarctic, just because I spent 7 months there. I'd already started my career, I'd already published 2 books, but it was slow going, as it is for most people. And I had this idea, why don't I write a travel book about the Antarctic, because nobody had done it before? And then one wouldn't have to do all that worrying about being truthful to the people one's meeting and representing the culture and all the rest of it, because there's no people and no culture. I mean, if I'd known what I know now about how difficult it is to get there, I wouldn't have had the spirit for the fight. But it's like waiting for a bus. It's too late by the time you've invested in it. Anyway, so I had the most wonderful 7 months, and I'll say a bit about the reason why that was so significant and how it really gave me a sense of perspective that I think has stayed with me throughout my career. For the reason I say, I mean, it's 1.5 times the size of the US, and there's no people, no culture, no time zone. It was not for the faint-hearted, Rajan. Let's get straight on to the lavatory arrangements, because I know that's what you want to know, really. When you're camping on sea ice, all you have to do, or it's an incredibly hard thing to do, is drill a hole. The sea ice you're camped on will be about 10 feet, 2 meters, 3 meters. So that's a really hard thing to do. But anyway, we won't go into that. You drill a hole in the sea ice, put a lovely commode over it with a lovely warm polystyrene seat. You're all set. You've got a windbreak behind it, and you're overlooking the Mackay Glacier, the Kazi with the best view in the entire world. So on my first day, I was trying to ingratiate myself in camp and carrying some tea around to the scientists. When one of them, Mike, came skidding to a halt across the camp floor with his wind pants around his ankles. I said, God, Mike, what's going on? And he'd been sitting on the Kazi, and a seal had come up through the hole in the ice. And of course, it's that hot, fishy breath.
Oh,
I know. So I just want to tell you, it's not, you might think it's wonderful, but it's not for the faint-hearted.
I know as well that you were the first female writer in residence there. And in a sense, did it really make you believe then that you were a writer, as it were?
Gosh, that's ever such a hard question. I'm 65, I've written 12 books, and I don't think I believe that now, Rajan. Do you believe you're a writer?
I've got imposter syndrome, so yeah, let's not go there. But seriously, I mean, you were taken seriously by them. You spent 7 months there, and you ended up writing, a really good book.
Well, the whole point of it was it's quite a complicated thing, but the American government has the Artists and Writers Program. It doesn't cost anybody any money because they're going anyway, taking the scientists, and you just hitchhike along, basically. And you have to then produce a book which has to be published by an American publishing house, because after all, the whole thing is funded by the American taxpayer. It's quite extraordinarily straightforward, given the kind of nightmare of grants and fellowships and all the rest of it. But that's probably more in the academic world, and I am not an academic. I never have been. I might say here, actually, seeing as we're talking about my life and how that trip fixed my life, it did fix it, but it did not make me a polar specialist, because I didn't want to be one, because I have always felt in my heart I'm a generalist. It's very unfashionable, but someone has to be one. And it means that each book I'm starting again from scratch and imagining those rows of academics looking over my shoulder when they come to review the book, saying she doesn't know anything. Well, I don't know anything, but I had a very strong sense when I was in the Antarctic that nobody owns it. Scientists don't own it. The men who pull their frozen sledges across it and publish books with frozen beards on the front, they don't own it. Nobody owns it. I had as much right to be there as anybody else. And that kind of helped me go forward, really. But I knew I could have gone on writing about little wooden ships and the pincers of a floe forever, because there's so many fabulous polar stories and everybody wants to hear them, the crunch of the ice and people eating their fingers and, the sledge dogs falling down crevasses and just so epic. But I wanted to, it kind of had to be pastures new every time. That was the challenge for me. I can't quite explain why that is, and there are some things that one doesn't have to explain, except that it reflects my restlessness. I am a traveller, I am a wanderer, and I think having to go from one subject to the next reflects that restlessness.
I mean, I want to talk to you as we go on about the art of good travel writing, but just with this particular scenario, I mean, was it difficult physically? I mean, surely you were out of your comfort zone, and 7 months is a long time, at one of the poles. I mean, it must have been hard, surely at times.
Oh gosh, yes. I had minus 114 with wind chill. And at that temperature, you throw ice in a cup of tea in the air and it freezes before it hits the ice and it tinkles. It's frightening when you get cold. It's frightening. But I wasn't pulling my sledge or anything like that, Rajan. I don't have those skills. And they give you lots of survival training and all the rest of it. But I was completely out of my comfort zone. But that's kind of where I want to be. Whether literally like that or metaphorically, which seems to me to be the entire rest of the time. So yeah, it was hard. I mean, to a certain extent, the hardest thing about it was took 2 years to organise. And like everybody else, I have to earn a living during those 2 years. So, I mean, I was young and it was easy to, we did all the freelance jobs that we used to do. Remember those days? Any old thing. And then, live off baked beans and all the rest of it. It's a long time ago now, but I don't regret it. It was a great experience, and it really did open a lot of doors for me because I could see actually what you want to do is get beyond the nitty-gritty and into that great spiritual realm above it all. But as a writer, you need very specific things to hold on to. And it's great being in the Antarctic where your specific things are, well, all the mechanical things you use to chip ice off the glacier and boil up for that cup of tea and all the rest of it.
Let's go on now to the significant travel experience you remember from your childhood, which obviously is a very important time in perhaps our attitudes to the way we travel. But yes, tell me.
I thought you were going to say your childhood, which obviously is a very long time ago, which indeed it was. Thank you. So I was brought up in the West Country in the 60s and nobody went anywhere then. Regular working class family. Package tours weren't invented. We used to go to a caravan at Weymouth. Nobody went anywhere. That's the homogeneity characterised my childhood. Everybody was like us. Anyway, the most bizarre thing happened in 1971. My parents read an advert in the Daily Express, which was the only newspaper that ever came into our flat, about package tours to Moscow and Petersburg. And my mother always had said that she'd been a Russian in a previous existence for reasons we do not know. Somehow the money was found. And off we went. I would say went up the M4, but it wasn't built by then. It was only half built by then to come off at Maidenhead, wherever it was. Anyway, we went there. And of course, it was the era of the iron grip of Intourist and all the rest of it. And on the first day, so we were staying in the 6,000 bedroom hotel, which is where everybody had to stay. And on the first morning, having breakfast, this group of men trooped in wearing ill-fitting suits with, I think, shamrocks in the... Anyway, long story short, it was the Northern Ireland football team there to play a match against Moscow. Well, we were a football family. My dad used to push me onto the terraces at Ashton Gate to watch Bristol City. So it was like the gods had come down among us. George Best, they were very friendly to us because there weren't any tourists there really, and they were kind of as bemused by the whole thing as we were. And Terry Neal, who's I think if I remember correctly was the player manager, offered my dad tickets for us all that night for the match. When my father, he fainted clean away. I mean, all talk of Romanov ancestry was forgotten. And it was just about the most exciting thing that ever happened to us. And outside, there was some press photographers. They weren't the paparazzi yet. Paparazzi hadn't been invented. It was just a few blokes in Macintoshes, you know. Best was one of the most famous people in the country. And I remember, Rajan, I was standing there next to George Best, and I remember one of them shouting out, "Put your arm around her, George." And he said, "She's a bit young even for me." I was 11. I was 11 at this point. Anyway, it's like a miracle. The family back in Bristol, looking at the Daily Express the next day, they all fainted clean away because there was this bloody photo of me and George Best. And the absolute miracle is I have got that photo. It's one of my most precious possessions. Anyway, it's the only childhood memory of travel I've got, but it's rather a fine one, I think.
I'm interested in the fact that, as you said, you had a blue-collar, working-class family background. I think your father was a builder. And the notion of going abroad was something almost viewed with suspicion. Is that true?
Oh, deep suspicion. Deep suspicion. It was the time of all those Carry On films. Do you remember? Carry On, there was one Carry On where they went to Spain and they turned on the taps and sand came out. Yeah, I mean, you just couldn't trust anybody who wasn't exactly like us. And obviously foreign was bad and everything was terrible. So yeah, it was another world, thank God.
And from that background, it's kind of interesting that you then went on to, a very good university. You studied classics, I think, and languages, and then became what you became, which was totally different to your upbringing. Why was that?
First of all, I had the best state education any girl has ever had. And I realise now that was just about luck being in the right place at the right time. So I went to the primary school on the corner in Westbury Park in Bristol, which was a super school. Then it was direct grant, a grammar school effectively. So I had a free place from 11 to 18 at this incredibly old-fashioned, strict girls' grammar school, which really suited me. Then I got an exhibition scholarship to Oxford from there. No money expended. And, my children are in their 20s now. And of course, what I wanted for them is what I had. It doesn't exist anymore. So that's really, I think, a big part of the answer to the question you asked me, in that I had an education that was very good and which really suited me. You know what it's like. You specialise from the age of about 2. So I just did masses of humanities and languages. Then I read classics at Oxford, which I really enjoyed. Now, I think what you're really asking me is what made me set off, seeing as none of them had, my family. And I don't really know the answer to that. It was like I was responding to another frequency. They were all very right-wing, so there was something I wanted to get away from, but I wouldn't want to make too much of that. And I knew I was a writer, and I knew I was a non-fiction writer. Why all these other travel writers insist on doing novels in between their travel books, I do not know. I had an arrangement with my agent decades ago that when he heard me say I want to write a novel, he'd shoot me because it'd be very bad. Yeah, I feel I'm a non-fiction writer, and travel writing has always been for me the perfect vehicle. A vehicle is the great analogy because you can smuggle everything else in. And similarly, biographies of people who travel. And when I wrote my first biography of a traveller, it was Sir Cherry Garrard, one of Captain Scott's men. I thought, oh my God, I've got to start all over again here. What is biography? How different is it going to be? And it turned out to be not different at all. You're exploring a human being like you're exploring another land. And the two, to me, have always been the same thing. And I've really gone on ever since, and still am doing now at my advanced age, doing a sort of combination of travel and the human story. I mean, biography is a love affair with human nature, I think. And I feel that love. I mean, I feel trying to get to the bottom of somebody's motivations, it's an impossible task, actually, just like it's impossible to try and portray a country with any adequacy on the page. And I like the fact that there's a fact that an impossibility that one acknowledges it from the word go anyway, and just try and do one's best. And I guess I write about people who travel, like my last book, which came out in April, was a biography of Jan Morris, because of course I understand people who travel. She spent half her life on the road and working life on the road, and so did I. So I understand that. I understand why she goes, why she always looks forward to coming back, the loneliness of the single bed in the hotel room, the even bleaker letter from HMRC. I get all of that. So I empathise with these people, and it's a very strange, strange little world that we inhabit writing these books.
Sometimes what happens though when you travel is that you actually fall in love. Now it could be with a place, it could be with a person, but I want to ask you, have you had that experience? Tell me about a time like that, an episode like that in your travels where perhaps romance struck.
Well, it was 1985, Rajan, and it was Poland. And again, like we said about Russia, still the grip of communism, but you could stay in homestays, got accommodation, but it was very strictly controlled and the people weren't allowed to talk to you and all the rest of it. Anyway, I arrived in Warsaw, I was on my own. It was dark, is all I can remember. And it was kind of central casting, these kind of gorgons manning the accommodation office, knitting. And I said, I want to have a room for one person. And they said, we don't have any single accommodation. We've only got double. So I said, I'm very happy to pay for a double. And they said, that's not allowed, with an extremely satisfied clack of the needles. They were absolutely delighted. And, things are looking a bit grim by this stage. Didn't speak Polish and all the rest of it. Anyway, the swing doors swung open with a grinding sound. And this guy came in. Looking back, I felt I knew he was Australian straight away, but how could I have known that? Anyway, he was a backpacker and had a very kind of Australian laid-back manner. And I heard exactly the same conversation being played out. Could I have a single room? We don't have any single rooms. Can I have a double? I'll pay for the double. That's not allowed. So, seeing my chance, I said, we'll take the double between us. And these two gorgons, of course, there couldn't have been any propaganda that convinced them of the decadent West any better than that. Anyway, this guy turned out to be a great guy. We went off together, had to get 3 trams, I think it was, not buses, to this flat where people wouldn't talk to us, but perfectly comfortable. And they had bolsters in those days. And he remember, as soon as we got into the room, he put the bolster down in the middle of the bed and he said, that's your side of the bed and this is mine. And we got on very well. So we travelled together, plenty of fabulous things to see in Poland, trains and buses and all the rest of it. And I remember we were at Chopin's birthplace, and they had some pianists from the conservatoire doing some Chopin preludes. And the light was falling, and it was kind of butterscotch through the beech trees and these Chopin preludes. Anyway, that was the end of the bolster. That went on for years on end, that story.
As somebody who is a frequent traveller, are relationships hard to maintain, perhaps, if from home, if you're always away?
Well, relationships are hard to maintain if you're always there, aren't they? Relationships are hard to maintain. I think I would say the other thing, actually, that giving a break and some freedom is excellent chiaroscuro. You do miss weddings, birthdays, significant moments. You do. You have to accept that. There's things you have to accept. But I don't think relationships are harder to maintain if you're away a lot than if you're here all the time.
Let's look at a situation, an experience you had where you were abroad and the whole time was tinged with a certain kind of sadness. Is there one like that for you?
Well, it wasn't so much tinged with sadness. Something immediately comes into my mind. It wasn't tinged with sadness when I was there. It's tinged with sadness now. Books are the main thing I do. And so usually they take 3 years. And so normally, speaking for a 3-year period, I only go to one place. I wrote a book about Russia. So for 3 years, I only went to Russia. Tried to stay east of the Urals because it's more interesting, in my opinion. And did loads and loads of traveling in Russia. You can do homestays there, and all of that, don't talk to them, is completely forgotten. It's all completely open and gorgeous now. People are really welcoming. You just meet tons of people. They're so hospitable. Russians are very frosty on the surface, but you try hard enough and you'll break through, and they're the most hospitable people on earth. And my book was about the writers of the Golden Age, so Pushkin's The Death of Tolstoy, and I was following in their footsteps really to see what had changed, which turned out to be nothing, in fact, because in those days, um, the ordinary people in Russia, which is everybody. I mean, the oligarchs and so on you read about is like 0.0000%, and I wasn't interested in them, nor did I meet any. I'm talking about people, what we think of as people, you and I. I've always had a ghastly time, and they were having a ghastly time then, by which I mean corruption down to the micro level. And then made friends with a wonderful woman called Natasha, and she was trying to get the money together for her son, who had to have an operation on both legs to straighten his legs. He was born with some condition. Anyway, I was able to help her a teeny bit, but it was a big struggle. And then after I got back, I learned that, in fact, the first operation hadn't gone very well. Anyway, struggle, struggle, struggle. You want to get into, granddaughters get into university, you've got to pay. Access to healthcare, you've got to pay. It's rotten to the core. And everybody was battling on. That's what you learn in Russia. They were battling on. So here's the thing that's sad, Rajan. I can't go back to Russia now, and I probably never will be able to go back, because that would be supporting of our regime. Now, that is sad. When you do homestays, people get a little bit of money. It brings a little bit into their lives, plus the fact they like meeting new people. It's a good thing that happens to them. So this is something else that's been taken away from them. And those people I stayed with in, around Siberia, I even went to the Russian Far East, which is 8 time zones from Moscow, the long way, opposite Alaska. They're the people whose sons have gone off to be killed in the meat machine, because they're poor.
And it's interesting that you should say that, obviously you have an image of a country, you have an image of a regime which comes from the media, global media quite often. And obviously when you get there and you meet the real people, they're as warm and as lovely and as friendly as any other person from anywhere else on earth. And that is just the constant lesson that we learn, isn't it, as travelers?
Maybe that's the most enlightening thing and uplifting thing that we learn in our game. Is that there's no such thing as nationality, really, is there? We're all the same, flawed, horrible human beings.
With a sense of humour, is what I always say, which is also brilliant. I want to take you now to the inheritance question. What is the experience that you would pass on? And who would you pass it on to, perhaps?
Well, I think I would pass on to anybody havering, questioning, doubting whether they want to take off or not. Particularly perhaps young women, wondering if they can set out, whether it's for them, whether they're allowed to go. Something happened to me many decades ago. I was on a very remote Greek island, on a very remote part of it, sleeping on the beach as we did then. And at about dusk, a yacht came into the bay. Not a super yacht, but a luxury one. And the light was so evanescent, as it is in Greece, that I could see things really in detail. And there was a man and a woman in evening dress, very tired. She had a gown on. Came and sat down on the sun deck, and white uniformed staff were serving them dinner. And that was all very nice. And then a fat bloke appeared on the top of the whole yacht and started singing from Tosca. It was an opera singer that they'd hired to give them entertainment. But the point is, Rajan, the cliffs, the acoustics and all the rest of it, it's like he was singing for me. But I've been thinking before that moment, another night on the beach fighting the rats off, why am I doing this? And that gave me my answer. There's always redemption. So what I would say is my advice to anybody, what I'd want to pass on is allow the serendipity of the occasion to take over.
I think you like the word transcendence, don't you, about situations like that?
I do.
Is that something that you feel deeply?
Yes, I really do, because I think that life is just a big struggle to rise above the gas bills and the 1,000,001 ghastly annoyances that are what modern life is. I guess we're lucky to have those annoyances. Um, and I think life is just one long battle to rise above all of that. There's as many annoyances travelling on the road as there are at home, more, you might say. But I think there's also more chance to transcend and absorb all of that, and that's the advice I'd give to everybody, really, and I think that's what I've learned, most of all from travelling, is that if you keep going, you can get in touch with something that's bigger than yourself, and that's the key to all things, in my opinion. And acceptance is the key to all things. Acceptance.
Very good.
And I
Yep.
think stepping out of myself, my environment.
Brilliant. Now then, we have a bonus question for everybody that I talk to, and that is, what is it, do you think, about travel that you especially love? What is it about this whole travelling thing that's a buzz for you?
Yeah, my grandmother was born in 1912 and never went anywhere. Was her life less emotionally rich than mine because she never went anywhere? No. So I don't make claims that my life is better because I'm half the time on the road. However, for me, traveling allows me to step outside of myself, to perhaps accept something that's larger than myself, and to tap in to whatever it is that's there. I don't want to be pretentious and say spiritual energy. You're particularly aware of that in the polar regions, coming, literally energy coming off the ice. And I think that it allows me to slip the shackles of the daily, the mundane, slip the shackles of the mundane.
I know you like this mantra that you sometimes quote, which I think is, I do not wish to be good. I wish to be hell on wheels or dead. Now, is that your view on life and travel and the whole shaboodle, do you think, ultimately?
Absolutely. Though it was much harder to be hell on wheels at 65 than it was at 25. People just think you're a battered old freak. But one has to go on trying. So the quote you just quoted back to me is by Martha Gellhorn, who's one of my great heroines and a great writer, foreign correspondent, but she also wrote about other aspects of travel. She was writing and fighting for 6 decades. She was completely brilliant. Married to Hemingway for a period. And yeah, she said, I do not wish to be good. I wish to be hell on wheels or dead. And that it was my sentiments. Exactly. I just have to try a bit harder now, I think. But being good seems to me a rather flimsy aspiration.
What about being a good travel writer? Very quickly, because there will be some people who will be thinking, I really want to do this. Just very quickly, because we're out of time, but just very quickly, what would your summed up, succinct message be to anybody who wants to be a good travel writer? Because obviously the source material is right in front of you, but what's the trick of doing it well?
Right. The most important thing is you have to read all the time. I repeat that. You have to read all the time. That's how I've learned, if I've learned anything. You have to read all the time. Read all the great classics and the contemporary travel books. See what works, see what doesn't, and learn your craft. It's a craft. It's not going somewhere, coming back, having a great time and going "Bleh" onto the page. That's not travel writing. It's a craft and you need to learn it, but you can. I did. So yeah, read a lot of stuff. Think about it like building a table, and a whole load of tools you can use to that effect. And I'd say do it. Don't look back. You're not going that way.
Excellent. Excellent. Sara Wheeler, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for being on Travel That Made Me.
Complete pleasure, Rajan. Thanks for having me.